Now, game week 11 was pretty average for me. I scored 57 points, had a small red arrow to 131k overall, but I still think that's a pretty good place to be going into, well, in the international break as we are now. And I've got 4 free transfers for game week 12. And here are my transfer plans. Starting things off then with a quick review of how my team got on in game week 11. Flecken in goal, Guardiola, Aït-Nouri and Aina across the back line. Only player to return was Aït-Nouri, who of course kept a clean sheet against Southampton. Aina, he's been a bit of a pain for me. I'm not saying he's a bad asset, but whenever he's scored points, he's been on my bench. And then whenever I've started him, he's blanked. I guess Newcastle probably wasn't the game to expect a clean sheet from. And the Forest fixtures do turn, but I still think, you know, they've been strong enough defensively that he probably deserves to keep his place in my team. Aït-Nouri, I think, is probably the best value, well, best cheap defender in the game. He's on 4 yellow cards, which is a bit of a risk. You know, next yellow card he picks up is a ban, but happy to keep him in my team. Got Flecken in goal, who I'm getting sick and tired of, to be honest. Another 1-pointer for him. Hasn't kept a clean sheet at all yet this season. Guardiola didn't keep a clean sheet again. His points have basically entirely been propped up by his amazing finishing in goals. And I'm just not sure that's sustainable for a defender. We'll talk a little bit about potential replacements for him in a second. You can see Rico Lewis on my bench there as well. Greaves has been injured. I haven't seen any reason to sell Greaves. But Rico Lewis is becoming, well, a bit of an issue. He's not really getting any attacking returns as such. He's also not keeping many clean sheets. And he's also not necessarily nailed on to start for Man City at the moment. So he's probably the main player on the chopping block at the moment. In my midfield, I had Rodgers, Palmer, Mbeumo and Salah. Salah was my captain. So basically my game week score was, half of my game week score was Salah captaincy points basically. A goal and an assist for him. I actually had Haaland as my captain pretty much all the way up until 15 minutes before the deadline. And apologies if you missed it. I shared my team on Twitter as soon as I made the transfer, but there might have been some people that missed that I changed my captaincy from Haaland to Salah. From my deadline stream, I ended it a little bit early because I had other things to do that morning, but I had Haaland as my captain at the end of that and changed it to Salah with 15 to go. And I'm really glad I did that. Got an assist out of Mbeumo. Rodgers, a blank and a yellow card, but he did miss a really good chance against Liverpool. And I think I was annoyed that he missed the chance, but I think proving that he's still getting good chances against really tough teams means I'm not really worried about starting him against anyone, and he's just an absolute stalwart in my team so far. Palmer, a blank. To be honest, in that Arsenal game, he looked like he was injured. He was playing, looked a bit restricted. I think with the international break to recover, you know, he's not in the England squad. I think he'll come back game week 12 fit and firing and ready to go, and I think he's genuinely a potential captaincy shout there. Haaland with a goal. I'm really glad I didn't captain him, particularly with that yellow card. If you captained him, it knocked him out of the bonus points and obviously cost him a point in the game as well. So yeah, I think if you captained Haaland, that yellow card would have cost you 6 points at the end of the game for a silly scuffle with Van Heck, the Brighton defender. So yeah, I'll take the 5 points from him. I've got to say, just the fact that I'm largely happy with the structure and nature of my team at the moment, I could sell him. You know, there is a narrative around FPL at the moment that if you're not going to captain Haaland, you should sell him. I understand that, but I just don't think I need to right now. Chris Wood and Raul Jimenez, really happy with the assist from Jimenez. There was always going to be a game where Chris Wood blanked. That was unfortunately against Newcastle. I don't even think he had a shot in that game, which was a little bit concerning. But honestly, I don't think Forest are that good from an attacking perspective in terms of actually creating chances. The reason Chris Wood has been so good so far this season is he's done so much with the limited chances he's had and just been an absolute sniper, basically, with his finishes. And there is a question mark as to whether I'll keep Chris Wood, I think, just with the fixtures turning for Forest. Like I said, Forest not necessarily being all that creative. Obviously, like I said, Chris Wood has scored a lot of goals, but the quality of chances he gets have not been all that good, which I'm not sure quite how sustainable that is in terms of him scoring goals, particularly with the fixtures turning. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep hold of Raul Jimenez, though. Really happy with him at his price. But there are also other strikers coming back to full fitness at around his price tag, potentially cheaper than Chris Wood, that I could look at. So yeah, game week 11, that's my team. So looking at my team coming up then for game week 12, I'm going to focus on the goalkeeper and defenders to start off. And I think there are 3 players in this starting 11 that I could potentially get rid of. Just looking at the bench, first of all, by the way, I don't think there's any case to start Greaves. He's injured at the moment. I can't start him. But also, I just don't want to spend a transfer on my 4 million defender. You know, he's going to be back relatively soon. I haven't needed to use him so far. I don't think I'll need to use him in game week 12. Yeah, I'm just going to keep him. I don't think it's worth spending a transfer because he'll be back soon. Aina's got Arsenal away. This is one fixture I probably wouldn't be comfortable starting him in. You can see he's got Ipswich in game week 13. And obviously Man City after that. But Forest have been good defensively this season. I don't see any reason to sell him. But for those 2 games, I think be comfortable putting him on my bench. Aït-Nouri, happy to start him against Fulham away. Obviously, I'm recording this during the international break. I believe he plays for Algeria, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, anything could happen with all of these players that are on international duty, right, with injuries, etc. So I reserve the right to change these plans, but I thought it'd be worth getting a video out with an update regardless. 3 players in this defence that could be on the chopping block. Flecken, who I mentioned I'm not happy with. Brentford haven't kept a clean sheet yet, but he does have 2 really good fixtures coming up in Everton and Leicester. So there is grounds, I think, to keep him there. Guardiola and Rico Lewis, though. Man City, 4 losses in a row, conceding goals. Got Tottenham and Liverpool coming up, 2 fixtures I'd suggest they concede goals in. I think Guardiola's relatively nailed on with just how well he's been playing at the moment, and the fact he can play centre-back and left-back. Rico Lewis, apparently undroppable according to Pep Guardiola, but has been dropped, or benched at least. So I'm a little bit unsure as to what to do with these 2 players. One thing that I am cognizant of is the Arsenal defence. Now, I know this might be an unpopular opinion. Arsenal have been the best defence statistically in the league over the last 2 seasons. This season has not been as good as the last 2, but I just think with Arteta's style of play, more defensive first, I think you would call it, and the fixtures they've got coming up, the fact that the last 2 seasons they've historically been the best defence in the league in terms of total clean sheets, expected goals conceded, actual goals conceded. They've led all of these stats for the last 2 seasons, right? And their team, the philosophy has not changed all that much. Fixtures coming up look great. Clean sheet odds here, according to 11FI, also look great. I'm quite big on the Arsenal defence. I'm trying to put aside, let's face it, right? The 11 game weeks we've had so far is a relatively small sample size in terms of data and team performance, etc. So I'm trying to not read too much into the 11 game weeks we've had so far, even though, of course, it's important to look at recent fixtures and more lean on the fact that historically they've been so good defensively. Basically, what I'm trying to say is I think the Arsenal defence are good, and I could potentially look at replacing Guardiola with someone like Gabriel and reserve the right to do that. Next up, I mentioned Flecken, potentially wanting to get rid of him. Here I've got the top goalkeepers for expected points over the next 5 game weeks according to Fantasy Football Hub. Ederson comes out on top. We've got Muric of Ipswich, Martinez, Pickford, Verbruggen, Sanchez and Flecken. So there are keepers on here that I could potentially replace Flecken with I've got 0.3 in the bank, but you know, if I downgrade other players, I could free up a little bit more cash to potentially upgrade Flecken. My favourite goalkeepers on this list, I don't think I can justify going for Muric. I think Muric and Flecken are much of the same. Teams that are poor defensively concede a lot of shots, so the goalkeeper's points are, you know, propped up by saves made. But I think the best goalkeeper, I always say this, the best goalkeepers in FPL are ones that keep a decent average amount of clean sheets and get the saves rather than just get loads of saves or just keep clean sheets, which I was hoping Flecken would tick the box of. Considering Brentford have not been horrific defensively in seasons gone by, but this season it just looks like they're all about scoring goals and don't really seem to care all that much about defending. So I think he's on the chopping block. 3 goalkeepers on this list I think I'm potentially looking at. Pickford, Verbruggen and Sanchez. I think with the budget I have available, just to do the straight swap, I can't afford Pickford, so it's between Verbruggen and Sanchez. And having watched the 2 teams, the 2 goalkeepers, I think Verbruggen is my favourite of the 2. There's not much in it in terms of expected points. And also I just think with Chelsea, the amount of players they have available to them, Sanchez, prone to the odd mistake, I just have a feeling he's going to get dropped at some point, whereas Verbruggen's place in that Brighton team feels relatively safe. So I think if I were to sell Flecken, I think I'd bring in Verbruggen. And then I've got the problem of Rico Lewis. Here we've got the best cheap defenders ranked over the next 5 game weeks. Oh, you can see that we've got game week 11 in there. Never mind that. This is still the best defenders for the next few game weeks. And here we've got a ranking of them. I think my favourite replacement, I've got a few in mind to replace Rico Lewis. I could go for Luca Dean, although I do appreciate that he could potentially share his minutes with Matson. Leif Davis is on there for Fantasy Football Hub expected points, but I just think they're not good enough defensively. Mazwari of Man United looks good as well. I think he could be a nice option, but there's a little bit of doubt as to how Man United is set up under the new manager. So he's a potential doubt. And then I look at Newcastle defenders. We've got Lewis Hall and Livramento. I probably think my favourite replacement for Rico Lewis is Lewis Hall. So potential transfers I could make here. Flecken for Verbruggen. Guardiola for an Arsenal defender. I'm looking mainly at Gabriel. And Rico Lewis, potentially for Lewis Hall. Now, I don't think I'm going to bring Bruno Fernandes in, but he's a player that I really like the look of. And it's not just a case of like recency bias, seeing him score an assist in a few games. It's a case of him just being a really good FPL option that ticks all the boxes. I remember going on an FPL interview with FPL Have a Beer a couple of weeks ago. I admit I haven't had Bruno Fernandes in my team so far this season, so it's easy, I guess, for me to say this. But I said on his stream, owners of Bruno Fernandes this season can count themselves really unlucky, because I can't have anyone telling me that Bruno Fernandes is a bad FPL pick. He ticks all of the boxes of a good FPL asset. He starts every game pretty much for Man United. He's one of the players that gets the least injuries, got one of the best injury records I've ever seen from a professional footballer. And considering like his play style, where he gets really stuck in, gets kicked a lot, it's fantastic really how available he is. He takes penalties, free kicks. You know, I would still suggest he's the talisman in that Man United team. He's just been really unlucky with the level of returns he's gotten this season. Basically, that's 4 XG in 2 expected assists. So in total, that's what? Trying to do maths there. 6 attacking returns this season, which he's actually pulled up so far. So 6 attacking returns from 11 appearances. Obviously, a load of those have come in recent fixtures. Yeah, I think he's a great option. He always has been a great option, and I think he's great. But with the midfield I've got in my team at the moment, I just don't see any reason to change it around. I'm really happy with Salah, Palmer, Mbeumo, and Rodgers. Of course, we've got a couple of potential injury concerns with Palmer and Mbeumo. Palmer, he played against Arsenal. This is the same thing that he had that was flagging him for that Arsenal game. He got through that fixture. I think with 2 weeks to rest and recover over this international break, he'll come back absolutely fine and ready to go. Mbeumo, though, has popped up with a pretty random flag, to be honest. We'll see the state of him. I think he'll be fine. It says he's just got a knock in the FPL game, which I don't think will mean anything, and he'll be fine. But if you've got potential injuries to Mbeumo and a transfer I'm planning to make to Rico Lewis, so he's 4.9 million at the moment, I could swap him for Lewis Hall. Too many Lewises. That would free up the cash to allow me to do Bruno in for Mbeumo, if I needed to, if Mbeumo was injured. So I'm not saying I'm going to bring in Bruno Fernandes. If these 4 midfielders are fit and ready to go, I'm happy with them. But I'm just bearing that in mind if I need to make the move. One final thing that's been playing on my mind is with my forwards. Now, I've obviously had Chris Wood in my team, who has been just an absolute hero for me, right? But the fixtures for Forest do turn. And like I said when talking about Forest, yes, Chris Wood has had a really good season so far in terms of scoring goals, but Forest have not necessarily been all that good, I don't think, at creating chances for him. Chris Wood is one of the biggest overperformers in terms of expected goals in the league, so he scored nearly double the goals that his expected goals have suggested he would. That's obviously down to the fact that he's an excellent finisher, but I would raise the question, would that continue? Regardless of fixture difficulty, would an overperformance of XG like Chris Wood has had continue across the season? I'm trying not to get too hung up on the stats though, because he has looked really good. But he does have Man City and Arsenal away mixed into upcoming fixtures. And then after that, it's Man United and Villa. So that's not the nicest set of fixtures. And then, of course, he does have Ipswich in Gameweek 13, which is a good fixture. And looking at the best, so what I've done here, filtered on Fantasy Football Hub, best forwards for expected points over the next 5 game weeks that are under 7 million. And Chris Wood comes out on the top of this list. So that suggests, the AI algorithms, etc., all have Chris Wood as the best cheap forward. But I see João Pedro is back for Brighton. He looked excellent when he came on. The Brighton manager, Hertzler, I think is his name, isn't it? He was raving about João Pedro before his injury, saying they don't have another player like him in the Brighton team and that he's basically the talisman as far as he's concerned. He takes penalties when he plays. Brighton fixtures, I said that when I went through Verbruggen, they look really good to the point where I'd consider buying their goalkeeper with the quality of their fixtures, which also means, the fixtures are good from an attacking perspective. He's 5.4 million, so that saves me a load of cash on Chris Wood. He's on penalties as well. He looks like a great option. I would also just caveat that I don't think that he is a minutes risk, but with Danny Welbeck playing really well at striker, Jorginho Ruta playing really well as the number 10, those are the two positions that João Pedro could potentially occupy. I would just question how secure are his minutes compared to like Chris Wood, Raul Jimenez, who both look to be fairly nailed on to start for their teams at the moment. No João Pedro coming back from injury, etc. It's just a question I would raise. I'm not suggesting he's not going to start, but he's got some stiff competition in that Brighton squad. And honestly, I just don't think it's worth a forward transfer yet. I'm relatively happy with Raul Jimenez. I'm not going to sell Haaland. I'm just happy with the general team. And then Chris Wood as well. Yes, he's got Arsenal and Man City, but I think I have to trust in the good form that he's been in, the elite finishing that he's had, and the fact he's got Ipswich in game week 13. I'd look at that Ipswich fixture for Wood. If I sold him this week, I'd be nervous about not owning him for that one. So I think these players just need to stay patient with them so far, but I definitely am eyeing up João Pedro. All right, and that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful. As always, these transfer plans videos are a bit rambly, but that's the whole point of these, right? To give you an idea of what I'm thinking of doing with my team, players I'm looking to take out, players I'm looking to bring in, etc. So hopefully you found that useful. Of course, I'm recording this literally mid-international break. A lot of my team are playing for their respective nations, so I reserve the right to change those plans depending on injuries, as you all should expect and know, right? So things could change before the FPL deadline and when the international break is over. But I thought regardless, it'd be good to get some content out, good to give you guys an idea of what I'm thinking of doing with my team. And I suggest my rank is reasonably good for this stage of the season, so hopefully you'd find it useful to get an idea of how someone near in the top 100k is thinking of doing with their team. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for things I should do with my team beyond what I'm thinking of. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Golden Goal channel that you can see there. Should be there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in my next video.